March Madness meets Hoosier Hysteria, where all the madness originally started, really. Hello and welcome to Double AI, the podcast on analytics and sports. I'm Phil, the transplanted Hoosier in Los Angeles, and with me are the two A's, part of the Double AI. Andrew is in San Diego. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, everyone.
And our honorary Hoosier is Ari in Chicago, right across the border. Hey, Ari.
Hey, everyone.
Well, we'll get to the whole thing about March Madness really starting in Indiana in a little while. And we have the research to prove it. But first, Andrew, BetMGM has a very predictable opening to all of March Madness, to the top four seeds, and let's get started with that.
Yeah. So what everyone's thinking about is, how do I fill up my bracket right now? And BetMGM has placed the odds are Gonzaga odds-on favorite, followed by Baylor and Michigan. And then as it is being played in the heart of Big Ten country, they round out that top six with Illinois, Iowa, and Ohio State. So
yeah, the pick six. And you could do worse than just putting down $1 or $2 on each of those six and seeing which of those chickens will come back to roost. Now, Andrew and Ari, what have we learned in major championships, NBA, NHL, NFL playoffs so far that we can apply to March Madness? What do you got on that, Andrew?
Well, I think the first thing is to expect the unexpected. It's still going to be such a strange experience for everyone that we don't really know what's going to happen. I'd be leery of taking anything we think we know about the way the tournament's played out in prior years and pulling it forward. And we did learn that from watching the professional playoffs that have occurred over the last few years. In some ways, it'll be less of a change because these players, have played all season in empty stadiums, not in front of their fans. But then going to the tournament, playing a single game, you're not in front of most of your fans. So it's going to be, it already was an abnormal experience for the student athletes. The one thing that'll be really interesting to see is travel. In prior tournaments, there could be so much travel for these teams. They have to travel once, and they're basically set. Rule of thumb used to be, if you were close on a couple different teams, pick the one that had traveled the least. It's tough for teams to travel outside of their time zone and so on. But if you're going to be in one place for the next month, maybe that's less of a problem. It'll be interesting to see.
Word to the wise. Now, all right, we always look for data, and 538 has some data this week.
Yeah, so 538 has some predictions, like what you said. Gonzaga is on top, 27% likelihood, followed by Illinois at 15% and Baylor 13%, and then drop off to Michigan at 4%. So Iowa has a 6% chance to win it all coming out of the West bracket with Gonzaga. And one thing that also point out, you said, or Andrew said, expect the unexpected. Looking historically, if you just base your bets on the seeds of the brackets, that's the lowest chance of success compared to what Vegas odds are, then 538 or above Vegas odds, and then the more advanced AI predictions.
Good advice. But there's a reality check here about the one team that everybody should be talking about. We're talking about the uniqueness. And that's because Gonzaga has earned it, Andrew. Reality check for sure, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've got a tremendous chance to be the first undefeated champions since, interestingly enough, Indiana Hoosiers in 1976, although Indiana isn't going to be a spoiler this year and is presently looking for a new coach. But on the other hand, Gonzaga, playing the next best team in the West, Iowa, played them on December 19th. They were up 20 midway through the second half and held on to win by 11 against another top 10 team. This is an astonishing team with a couple of the best players in the country.
Well said. Now, 538.com also predicts for the women's bracket that Stanford has a 36% chance of winning the women's Final Four in San Antonio. Now, all right, back to the men's field. You have some fun factoids for us. We can have fun with this.
Sure. So looking behind me, that's the USC Trojan Marching Band. And speaking of USC, 7-footer. So again, 7 feet tall. Evan Mobley, he's likely going to be the #1 NBA draft pick the next time. So keep an eye on those run and dunk Trojans, and they're really fun to watch. And I'm here in Chicago. We have the Ramblers. Loyola is playing Georgia Tech in the first round. And their #1 fan supporter, that Lady Jean, is going to be traveling with them, and she's almost 100 years old. So love their story from a couple years ago. Severe underdogs to get to the finals. So that's the Ramblers versus the Rambling Wreck, and Georgia Tech, actually the Yellow Jackets, but their football mascot is an old Model T or a wreck. And their fight song goes something like, "I'm a wrangling wreck from Georgia Tech and a hell of an engineer."
Well done, Ari. That is awesome. I believe it goes to the tune of like an Irish jig. Very well done. And Buzz, their Yellow Jacket mascot, would highly approve of what you got there. Now, Andrew, we don't want to leave out Purdue here because we give Georgia Tech, that's a slide rule school, but Purdue, see if you can take us through. And now this is where we have to come clean. Ari just did the Trojan marching band over his shoulder because Mobley, the highest valued player in the tournament, but over your shoulder is a connection to our next bit of facts. What do you have to show us today, Andrew?
Yeah, so in honor of discussing Purdue and talking about space, this is a Hubble telescope image of the pillars of creation. So it's a very famous Hubble telescope image. And the reason we're doing this in honor of Purdue is because if you ask people outside of the military academies, who has produced the most astronauts, I think very few people would realize it is Purdue, including the first man to walk on the moon, a wide variety of other individuals, but Purdue has produced 15 astronauts. That's one more than MIT and nearly twice what Stanford has produced. And I think in the upper Midwest, people do know Purdue is a solid, exceptionally good engineering school. But I think sometimes outside of the upper Midwest, people lose sight of just how good Purdue is. But Purdue has a long history in this. They had the first university-owned airport in the nation. They have a school of aviation and transport technologies. They have a very strong science program as well.
And the Van Horn family, to our credit, has one Purdue University graduate in computer science, guys, by the way. So thank you, Mandy Van Horn, for being the one exception to the Ball State rule. Speaking of that, let's see. Go Ball State. That's an Indiana school, not the Indiana University. Although I did take summer classes at IU and Purdue. And then here we go. Go. That's it. There. Yeah, we have more of this coming up. We can do this all day.
Well, Phil, I should add, Purdue was in my top 3 for graduate school when I was making the decision. So that I did apply. I was accepted. I was given a scholarship, and then I turned them down.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. But it is true at Purdue, you can actually work and study at an airport while you take classes. So good. Now, Ari, do you have one more note about the tournament?
Yeah, just going on March Madness and almost tournament. I worked with Dan Duquette, who was the GM of the Expos, Red Sox, Orioles. His cousin, Jim Duquette, former GM of the Mets and well-known sports. But his other cousin, I don't even know if you and Andrew knew, was the basketball coach at UMass Lowell. And they had their best season in school history, taking it, just shy of the American East title and uh, playing in the bracket against, I think it would have been UConn, but yeah, they did end up beating the #1 seed UMBC. Great video clip if you could just watch the end of the game. But yeah, we're really proud of Dan's, one of his other relatives, and to take them from basically obscurity to, to that level speaks well. I think it's something I was proud of, and something that will help the school with recruitment and being positioned for future years.
Now, guys, we're just doing what everybody's doing around offices or virtual offices, right? This is water cooler conversation this week. And Andrew, that leads us to our next thing about pools during the month of May.
Yeah, so in what's probably the least surprising piece of information about around March Madness, betting pools are really big. 50 million people are expected to try betting pools, legal or otherwise, according to the American Gaming Association. There may be fewer office pools as we're not in offices, although with the various sports sites allowing you to create pools among your friends, probably still happens. The other thing that was interesting is there's been an uptick in gambling interest in just straight bets. So just straight bets on who's going to win the NC2A tournament altogether. So we'll see how the gambling numbers come out at the end of this, if they're up like everything else has been over the last year.
Now, guys, when you watch shows, do you have this in hand? And do you jump off of, if you're watching a movie or sporting event, you go ahead and chase down information that just fascinate you? Do you do that?
I try to avoid doing it because I like to focus. I tend to leave my phone farther away from me so I don't do it. But otherwise, yeah, I would be looking up stuff.
Well, I saw Ari nod his head. I'm the
Yeah.
same way. Now, guys, as we're recording, my niece, Mandy Drake, Purdue University grad, just texted, which reminded me of keep your phone nearby for the first couple of nights of the tournament. And here's why. Google the names and traditions of the locations around Indianapolis, Bloomington, and West Lafayette. There are 6 big barns, gym locations that are being utilized for the tournament in central Indiana. Especially take a look at the history of Hinkle Fieldhouse at Butler University. It's in downtown Indianapolis. It's hosting its first tournament game since 1940. That's back before World War II. It's also, most people know it because it's the film location from the Hoosiers, the championship game. It was built in 1928 and got a facelift back in 2014 worth about $36 million. But the cool thing is they retain a lot of the original character of the building and the parking lot around it. When you drive up, there's a bit of driving back in time. It's back in time. It's really cool. Now, the opposite is true with Bankers Life. That's the stadium that the Pacers and the Fever use in the NBA and WNBA. It is thoroughly modern. And we've said this before on AAI, that it is the best place in the universe to watch a basketball game. And, people say, I've heard that. Then they go watch there, and it's universal. Whether it's really an unusual place. Plus, it has historic exhibits all throughout the concourse that are really incredibly well maintained. Lucas Oil Stadium, that's the Colts' home. The State Fairgrounds Coliseum is a refurbished relic, and I mean relic. You can go back to the early days of the ABA. That was the home of the old red, white, and blue ball Pacers. And because I'm an Indianapolis native, guys, I saw the Jackson 5 live at the State Fairgrounds inside in the mid-60s. So that was like maybe their first or second big national tour. They may have had a cartoon on TV or something like that. So true story. And then the other games are at Indiana University in Bloomington, IU, not UI, and at Purdue University in West Lafayette. So I'm a Hoosier living in LA, which we rarely talk about, wink, wink. So a little bit of show and tell for us there. Thanks for putting up with that, guys. You just made my week.
That's great.
All right, let's turn the page. We'll come back to a little bit of basketball later on. Spring training underway. All right, one thought about what stands out to you in spring training so far.
Well, first of all, great to see that there is spring training, that it's lasted, it's gone along very well. There's, some fans watching. One of the things, just looking at StatCast, which in and of itself is interesting, that they're releasing numbers from spring training. It used to be just the regular season. And again, just how hard the ball's being hit and how hard the ball's being thrown. Just like the percentages of hard hit balls, it's the game has changed. So I get excited from that. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that. And also the other thing, just looking at Andrew, the Padres, made some great moves, and now how are they going to put theory into practice is one thing I'm personally interested in seeing how it comes out. But Tatis, he just did a 114 mile an hour grand slam, 441 feet. So yeah, they're an exciting team to watch.
And Andrew, do you have one thing and an observation so far as we're halfway through spring training?
I actually haven't. I haven't even started watching baseball. I'm just behind. There's too much else going on right now. To be fair, when I was in Minnesota, spring training was really, really important because it meant this horrible winter I was living through is almost over and I have hope. Living in Southern California, I don't have that same draw to spring training because honestly, it's going to be the same weather tomorrow anyways. So I don't follow it as closely as I used to. We'll be ready to go once the season starts, though.
Well, for me, I have two things. Shohei Ohtani hit a pair of home runs. He's already touched 100 miles per hour. He's a real pleasure to watch. I know a lot of people in the Eastern and Central time zones don't get to see him, but he's a treasure. And I was saying the same thing nearly a decade ago about Mike Trout. It's just fun to watch him regularly. And then it's good to know that while the Texas Rangers are going to have full capacity, that now I believe all 30 teams are cleared to welcome at least partial crowds. And that's a good way to reach the midpoint of spring training. All right. We're about to wrap things up, but we have some fun notes here. First, Ari, let's go, or Andrew, let's go with you. Grammy ratings from this weekend. The Grammys are standing out for all the wrong reasons, in a way.
Yeah. So 8.8 million people watched the Grammys, which is a record low. And the last time was about 17 million back in 2006. So that was the record. So I mean, huge drop, a 53% drop from last year. Now, that being said, it doesn't appear that it's just a Grammys thing, but it's probably a rating shows thing. Because the Golden Globes saw a similar 62% drop in viewership. So as people are locked at home looking for stuff to do, they're not watching the award shows.
Well, and that leads us next to Ari. Ari is coming to an IndyCar pit crew near you, another Indiana. We're going to touch on another Indiana thing. So Ari, explain that to us, please.
Yeah, as part of Indy racing, there's different cars and drivers, and my company Data Robot sponsored one of the drivers, one of the cars, the RKM Racing, Robert McGinnis. He's like a champion of many races, very exciting of what he's doing. So I'm going to be going on a multi-city tour, kind of not, I would say on the track, but on nearby, close to the track. But they are heavy data consumers. 300 sensors on the car, sending information back 1,000 times per second, and you have a pit crew, but now you have a data analytics crew that can feed information like take the next turn wide or short. And then it goes beyond that. Working with MIT to create a self-driving car, over 200 miles an hour, using his racing persona, his personality. So that's like a fun side thing. But yeah, we'll be traveling around and I'm going to get to learn what goes on inside the head and the operations of such a quick thinking operation. And it's going to be fascinating. Like in baseball, you can't really communicate during a game. In football, you could in a helmet. In race cars, you could do real-time data analytics. So how that all fits in is going to be fascinating to be a part of.
I think that's going to be fun for you, and I look forward to hearing about your adventures. Andrew, as we wrap up this month, a lot of sports betting, but we have one wild guest that came home. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So an individual in Valley Forge Casino in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, placed a 15-team parlay across the NBA, NHL, and NC2A, put down $604 and hit all 15 for a payout just shy of $1 million. I mean, just a wild, wild thing.
We all trade texts during the week. That's almost as amazing as the next thing, because when we traded the next thing, Andrew, your reaction was, it's not April Fool's, but this falls right into that category. And Michigan State took a big gulp, and then they released or pressed send on this press release. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Michigan State men's basketball team will now be known as the MSU Spartans, presented by Rocket Mortgage, in a 5-year deal in the branding throughout their arena. So money is coming to sponsor college sports.
So guys, think of that. On their jerseys, instead of just MSU, it's now MSU SPBRM. across go MSU RPBM, something like that.
There will be jokes forthcoming.
Yeah. And finally, my last geeking out on Hoosier Hysteria. So guys, I learned that this week. The phrase March Madness is documented going back to 1931 in newspapers in the state of Indiana. Now, hat tip to journalist Mark Monteith in Indianapolis. He's been all over that this week on social media. Now, that's 1931. But there were also stories in 1937 and 1938 about the Indiana high school boys basketball tournament that referenced the phrase in headline and in copy March Madness. Now, the Illinois High School Athletic Association mentioned it in 1939 in an essay about the tournament titled March Madness, about the Illinois High School Athletic Association state tournament. The Illinois Association trademarked the term in 1986. But by that time, Brent Musburger of CBS Sports grabbed it and used it liberally. I believe he's an Illinois native. He grew up in Illinois, went to Northwestern, that kind of thing, and he heard it, grabbed it, and used it. But it was first used in the state of the Hoosier State. We often say, Hoosiers love hoops, and I'm a Hoosier. I love this time. I'm going to have to do this one more time. So I grew up as an ABA, Indiana Pacers fan. And if you know that's 31, you know that is Reggie Miller.
Miller, yeah.
Who's from Southern California, by the way. And to tie it all up, his sister, Cheryl, played college ball at USC. Yes. Yeah, she's a Trojan. That was a layup there. But he had brothers who played at UCLA.
It wobbled the layup, but it did go in.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. Thanks for having fun with us. We hope you do well and your brackets all come to fruition. Enjoy the basketball. And thanks for hanging out with us here on AAI, the podcast on analytics and sports. For Ari and Andrew, I'm Phil. We'll see you next week.